we have a fabulous speaker to kick off our day and just set the tone for these 2 days of deep learning, and that's Reagan Jackson. And she's great. She's a Seattle-based activist, author, and podcaster. Speaking of which, hang out tonight for the Friday night podcast taping for Radio Survivor. She's one of our speakers on that panel. So please join us at the Fifth Ave Theater, Fifth Ave Cinema tonight near the Portland State University campus. So without further ado, Reagan Jackson, the future is participatory. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ooh, I like that. Yes. So all the people who are in the back, can you come a little closer, please? I know it's morning and there's coffee happening. There's like a whole front row thing happening. Yeah, I know we're talking about the future being participatory, but I actually meant now.
Really?
The future is now. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for indulging me. I appreciate it. Oh, you guys are awesome. Yeah, and I do promise to make you talk. It's gonna happen, so it'll be great. When I was thinking about what I wanted to contribute to this conference, I realized that there would likely be very many people in the audience with more experience and expertise than I have with community media. And in fact, I guarantee that all of you have way more experience with technology. And this PowerPoint, if it goes wrong, one of you is gonna have to handle that. But something that I bring to the table is that I'm a facilitator. I work with Young Women Empowered.
Yes.
So yeah, I love it. I build programs for girls ages 13 to 18, and I kind of love it. But the other thing that I do is that I'm a community organizer. And that's something that has really helped me to basically live my life better. So rather than coming to you as an expert, I'd like to come to you as a co-creator in the visioning of this process, of this participatory future. So what's going to happen today, or at least in the next hour, is that first we're going to talk about who's in the room, and I mean that literally, who's in this room. And then next we're going to talk a little bit about the broader who's in the room when we're making media. We are going to do a little collective brainstorming. I'm going to share with you a bit about my journey, and then I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. And my hope today is to leave you with more questions than answers. So if I've done that at the end of the day, let's call it a success. I also want to give some key components for this framework to moving forward, and I will give you homework. Yeah, there's always homework. And my invitation for you for this next little chunk of time is just to participate as you wish to receive. That's something I always tell my young people, because what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And what you choose to do in terms of your engagement is entirely up to you. There's no judgment from me. If you're tired and you're just kind of oh, this is a lot, then that's fine. And I'd love for you to stretch a little bit. So if you're someone who takes up a lot of space normally, I'm going to ask you to be that deep listener today. And if you're someone who is a little more introverted and doesn't necessarily take up as much space, I'm going to ask you to get big. Can we do that? Sure? Yeah? Awesome. All right, let's start with just a little bit of a roll call. What kind of media makers do we have in the room? Raise your hand if you're into print media. Yeah? Me too. 1, 2. Okay, I want you to be noticing also who's in the room so you can make connections afterwards. What about radio or broadcasting? Okay, give a little sound since you're audio. Oh, I love that. All right, if you are into film or TV, I want an action clap. Okay, a lot of TV people. All right, good to know. So is there any other media that you're making that doesn't fall into those categories? Can you shout it out? Online, web media? Awesome. Who else is web-based? Okay. Excellent. Street theater. Oh, that's so cool. Loving that. All right, so show of hands, for how many of you is media your full-time gig? Okay, many, the majority. And for how many of you is it more of a side hustle, side passion? Okay. Okay, just getting a sense. All right, so we're gonna do this thing called a think, pair, share. And what's gonna happen is when I say connect, you're gonna turn to a neighbor, and it's okay if it's someone you already know, because I'm gonna ease you into this. And what I would like you to do is come up with 3 ways in which you're aligned. So that can be like, do you live in the same geographical location? Do you share a commitment to anti-racist work? Do you love the same podcast? But you're gonna have 3 minutes to do this, and our lovely Laura is gonna give us the time. So connect. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, and wrapping it up. Thank your partners for their time. Okay. All right, so what did we find out? Yeah? Wait, hold on, wait until everybody's ready. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Works every time. Excellent, love it. So what'd you find out? What are some ways that you align?
Okay, Anne and myself, I'm Cheryl. We both do government access channel programming.
Oh, cool.
We're both producers, and we both stream our videos as well on social media.
Beautiful.
And we're both first time here.
Me too.
Yeah.
Hey.
Thank you.
So we align. Perfect. Thank you.
Anne, thank you.
Thank you both for sharing. What else? What are some other ways we align?
Zahid Chowdhury, Vice President, Thurston Community Media. Julie and me, we find out lots of things, but I was going to go to my favorite question, anti-racist work, but we didn't get to that, time was short. But, breaking the ice, strangers, totally, never met before. So we find out that we both have in our hearts, that seed, Julie says, for social justice work.
Ooh.
How to use the public rights of ways, our airwaves, to create that beautiful paradigm of tomorrow.
Very good.
That is juicy. Thank you. We'll do one more, and then I'm going to talk. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Sonia. This is Soha and Lexi. We all have a Midwest connection. I'm from Kalamazoo, but they have family and friends in the area. We've all been to Paris.
Ooh.
And we all have a passion for sharing the media with the community.
Beautiful. Me too on all of those things. So now we're getting into the community part, but all of us are members of a variety of different communities. We belong to our cities and our neighborhoods, our families, religious organizations, and workplaces. And some of these communities are a result of happenstance. And then some of them are intentional, but either way, the media that we create is a product of our communities. So for the purpose of moving into the future, it's time to assess what's working and what's not working. The potential of any given community is that it can provide us with resources, support, a sense of belonging, and sometimes even a sense of purpose, but it's important to question how community is determined. Who's included in our community and who is not, and why? Who has access to resources and support and who doesn't, and who feels like they belong, and what kind of privileges come with belonging? I think it's pretty easy to figure out what you align on, but what happens when you don't have common ground? What would happen perhaps if, and I'm not going to ask you to do this, but what would happen if I ask you to turn to the person next to you and find the 3 core ways in which you are diametrically opposed to one another? Either in values or in lifestyles or in your life experience. Depending on what you discovered, could you still co-create with one another?
Oh, yes.
I think so too. But I think it's also an important question. What are like the fundamental principles within your community that must align for connection and creative process to happen? So that's a question we're going to come back to as well, because it's something that I think is important to moving forward to make that distinction. But let's just take a moment to talk about the state of media in general. I love this image. I think it's, it makes it so light and fluffy and blue skies. And I feel like it's a little inaccurate. I think there should be hurricanes and cyclones and fires, like the fires in California. This makes it look like they're actually clear directions and they're transparent and easily marked. I think that we're living in a really confusing time and complicated time when traditional media is imploding and social media is exploding and the algorithms of Facebook are able to influence election results more than CNN. You can self-publish a bestseller or make a movie on your phone that millions of people will watch on YouTube, or you can live in complete obscurity depending on the way the wind blows. So Webster defines community as a unified body of individuals. And as a nation, I think it's safe to say that we're pretty far from unified right now. So where I live, just disclosing who you voted for could cause a fistfight. And bipartisan journalism is mostly non-existent, and where you get your news has become a political statement. So in this kind of a landscape, there's an opportunity, because community media takes on a new level of significance. Now, our role is not only to inform or to educate, but also to reconnect people and provide opportunities, if not for healing, then at least for civil discourse. What started out as an alternative to the mainstream is quickly becoming the new mainstream. If you haven't had a chance to check out Chimamanda Adichie's TED Talk on the dangers of a single story, homework, I'll recommend it. Please do. How stories are told, who tells them, when they're told, how many stories are told are really dependent on power. One example of this kind of convergence, too, of complications is what happened with the Dakota Access Pipeline. There was some mainstream media coverage, but after reporters started getting arrested, I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but there wasn't a lot of network coverage around when it did do the thing that we all knew it was going to do, and it started to leak. There was one New York Times article oh yeah, that's leaking, bad things are happening. But I feel like if Melania Trump wears blue shoes, it gets more of a longer news cycle than something like actually impacting people's lives. So yeah, to really understand what happened, we had to rely on community media. And yes, there were some celebrities live tweeting, but the most comprehensive coverage came from Native folks on the ground who were able to put together videos and articles and disseminate that information through their networks and social media platforms. These kinds of stories are the most powerful and important work that's happening. This used to be the work of commercial media, but it's our job now to get the word out about situations that are impacting us because, as Gil Scott-Heron said, the revolution may or may not be televised. But with great power comes, the things you learn from Spider-Man. So what is our responsibility towards the creation of ethical media? Now that all the rules are out of the window, how do we determine which stories should be told and by whom? What are our guidelines for creating and maintaining a healthy community with a balanced distribution of power accessible to all voices? And when we find ourselves with divergent belief structures, what is our responsibility to provide space for differing viewpoints? Coming back to my previous question, what are the fundamental principles within your community that must align in order for connection and the creative process to take place? So we're gonna do one more think, pair, share. This time, I'm gonna ask you to speak with someone that you haven't connected with. So definitely introduce yourself. And introduce yourself with the kind of media that you're doing. And I want you to think about two questions. One is, what's one challenge you're currently facing in your work? And the second is, how do you define ethical community media? And we're gonna take 4 minutes to do this one. Connect. Okay, take 10 seconds to wrap it up. Thank your partners. If you can hear me, tug your ear. Awesome. All right. How was that? Seems like you guys you're in it. Did you get to the ethical community media part, or were you stuck with the challenges?
Oh, yes.
Yeah? All right, let's hear some of your definitions. What are we working with?
I struggled. That was one of my challenges. Was
How to define?
how to define ethics in community media.
Okay. Well, who can help Laura out? What do we got? Oh, come on! Just a second ago, everybody was talking.
We were focused on the challenges we're facing in our work and how that relates to ethics and the tension, I think, between what people believe community radio and community media to be.
Oh, that's a whole other thing too. Yeah, just it's having a common language even for what are we doing?
And the other thing in community radio that we're working on is being inclusive to all voices. So we might have a voice, but we want to have a platform that we honor and listen to and express, many voices in our community.
Many voices, one tribe. Beautiful. Well, that's actually one of the challenges I had. Does anybody have anything though that they're a burning thought that they want to share about definitions of ethical community media? Yes.
Even though my own volunteers have rebelled, that giving voices to the people who totally we don't agree with, but they come from extreme positions to the right, and still, calling them in.
Calling them in. That's important and challenging and hard, but important. Thank you. Thank you for thinking about this, and I'm hoping that we'll continue throughout the next 2 days to really get some languaging around it and to start shifting our focus from what our challenges are to what our opportunities are. But yeah, representation. Sorry, I love Shirley Chisholm. Literally, I just want to put her picture up. But yes, one of my biggest challenges has been making a way out of no way. And Shirley Chisholm always says that if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own chair. Bring a folding chair. But what happens when you don't even know where the room with the table is? Let alone how to get there, or how to gain access. So for me, one of the fundamental components of community media is that it accurately represents the community, and that we all have equitable, that we're all equitably reflected, not only in the product, but in the process. I don't feel like we can talk about the future without first addressing the past and the current realities of who's included in media and who's not, and how representation and access have shaped our own experiences. So for me personally, because I promised I'd share a bit of my journey, I've been a writer all of my life, but I've only been a journalist for the last 5 years, and even that was kind of an accident. One of the reasons I came so late into the field is partly because my experience with education and with media has not been participatory or inclusive. I just didn't think there was a place for my voice. I wanted to be able to tell the truth, not just repeat facts. And everything that I learned about journalism said that you couldn't do that and be successful. But I was always a writer, and I was that kid who carried a notebook in her purse. I still do. I noticed people, and I practiced describing settings. I had a big imagination, so I made up lots of stories, but I also wrote a lot about what was true as well. And both of my parents are total news junkies, so every morning we listened to NPR, and every evening we had the local news, and Friday nights it was 2020 with Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs, and Sundays it's 60 Minutes. And when I took my first and only journalism class as a junior in high school, it was just intuitive. I just knew how to do it. And my professor ended up taking one of my assignments and submitting it not to our school paper, but to the Cap Times, which if you're, nobody from Madison here? No? It's like the equivalent of the Seattle Times, but for Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm from. So they published it, and I was like, what? I'm a real writer now. See my byline, like, I got so excited. And yet I never joined the school paper. And I was actually never invited to join the school paper. Oversight, clearly. But even if I had been invited, I question whether or not I would have said yes. Because I didn't see myself as a reporter. And it's not just that I didn't see anyone who looked like me doing the job, although that's definitely a part of it. But it was also because I didn't appreciate the way that reporters wrote or talked about issues. Articles were informative but dry, and it seemed like part of being a reporter was being rude and asking insensitive questions. And yeah, it just, at the time I didn't realize that these were choices you could make. And that as the person telling the story, you could prioritize your subject's humanity. Not by pulling your punches and asking soft questions, but by genuinely and authentically connecting with the people that you're interviewing. And that kind of approach could yield a lot more just information, but also honesty and truth and good stories. So in 2013, I had brunch with my dear friend Sabrina, shout out, and she introduced me to the founder of the Seattle Globalist. So is everybody familiar? Oh no, what happened? I didn't touch anything. Chris. All right, well, somebody's gonna come fix that. That's not me. I'm gonna stay in my lane here. Yeah, so are you familiar with the Seattle Globalist at all? Yeah? A little? So it's an online news aggregate. Google when you get home. Subscribe, love us, love on us, we're great. They asked me to, they were asking me about my work of taking young people abroad, because I am a study abroad leader, and I've taken over 200 young people abroad, and I had some things to say about it. And Alex Stonehill, who was then the editor-in-chief, thought that what I had to say was interesting. And he suggested that I send him a piece about it. So I did, and I honestly expected him to just send everything back bleeding, but he didn't. He published it, and he paid me for it, more importantly. And then I was like, oh, this is a thing? Like, if I send you articles, you'll give me money? So, yeah, I started doing that. And, of course, I had no idea how the process was supposed to work and that you're, like, supposed to write a pitch and all of that. So I would just write articles and send whole articles to him. And after about the second or third time of that, he sat me down and was like, hey, do you want to learn about this process? Because we love what you're actually writing, and we would like to have a little bit more input. before you write the piece. And I was like, oh, that's a thing? Great. Sure, we can do that. So my first year, there was a pretty steep learning curve, but Alex was a great editor. And not only did he teach me how to write pitches, but he just made me a stronger writer in general through his feedback. And most importantly, he taught me that there was a space for my voice, and that my identity and my personality and my positionality and my life experiences were all things that I could use in the context of journalism, and that they were valuable, that my voice added value to the stories that I was telling. So though we came from pretty different backgrounds, his allyship is what ultimately helped me to become a journalist. Hey. And to realize my potential. But one of the things two things. One is I was also included on the conversations about the editorial content of The Globalist. And I think that's really important to note, because I don't think that everybody always gets the opportunity to be in the room where people are literally brainstorming what kinds of stories are we going to create? What kinds of stories can this media organization tell? And who do we want to be telling those stories? So having a seat at that table was very impactful for me. And it was also really helpful to have someone who could explain all the jargon and terms of things that I didn't know. And that's something that I'm always a little bit intimidated about in community media spaces, because I'm like, yes, I make media all the time. I do these things every day, and I kind of don't know what all you're talking about. And I want to know. So as you're framing inclusion, thinking about even just the language that we use as a way to be inclusive of folks. So originally, the tagline of the Seattle Globalist, and it still is where Seattle meets the world. And so my first articles were very outward focused, were very global in tenor. But at a certain point, I decided I wanted to write about something a little closer than home, or a little closer to home, which is Rainier Beach. So I live in Rainier Beach in the 98118, which everyone always touts as being one of the most diverse zip codes in the state of Washington, though that is changing. But before I moved there, I always heard only negative things about the area. That there's crime and gang violence, and it was just not a safe place to be. But once I moved there, I realized that was an old perception, that there had been a lot of gang violence in the 90s, but at this point it wasn't any more dangerous than any other neighborhood in Seattle. And in fact, when I started looking at the numbers, come on now. Yeah, you want to watch that next? Chris, save me. What I noticed, the biggest difference between, like, for example, Wallingford and Rainier Beach is the amount of people of color living there. And in fact, Wallingford has more car thefts and was, having a big rash of break-ins when I was working on this article. And so I was like, so if that's the only difference, like, why is there such a huge difference in perception? And what I discovered is that it was partly the fault of media, and that the only thing that reporters were coming to cover in Rainier Beach was crime. They didn't come for any sporting activities. They weren't coming for community celebrations. Look around when there's any kind of dance activity, there's no one covering it. So I wrote this article called Who's Afraid of Rainier Beach? Just going through all of that. And it practically broke the website for The Globalist. It went viral. And what ended up happening was there were just a lot of people in my community who felt the same way, but who didn't know that, like, other people were thinking that either. And the comment section, it's one of the only articles that I would say this about, but the comment section of this article was like people writing whole essays about their experience with the neighborhood, and neighbors connecting with neighbors. People were writing back and forth to one another, talking about their experiences. And there's this huge unmet need that we met and identified. I'm just gonna keep going. Sound good? technology is sometimes not my friend, and that's okay. We don't have to be friends right now. But what that did in meeting that unmet need that we didn't even know was a need was that we realized that there were a lot more people in the community that wanted the opportunity to have a platform to tell their stories. And there are a lot more stories to be told than just the people in the room could tell. And so we started, as an organization, doing community media training. We started doing teaching journalism 101, writing with voice. That's my favorite thing that I like to teach. And then also like how to use your iPhone to take like good pictures for when you write the articles, and really like we've cultivated about 300 unique contributors annually and continue to do this kind of outreach so that first time writers are coming in and really getting their stories told. So as an individual, I also began covering the South End because that's the media that I wanted to see in the world. So since then, I've written over 100 articles. I've been published not just in the Globalist, but in the South Seattle Emerald, in the Black Girl Nerds blog, Crosscut, Yes Magazine, and in 2014, I won my first award. The first of many, actually. And in 2016, I received a Globie for being the Seattle Globalist Journalist of the Year. Thanks. And, that actually was my favorite and most significant award because I won it for doing things on my own terms. And it was the moment where I finally reconciled the fact that I may never look or sound like a traditional journalist, but that there is a place for my voice. So then next, I started to think about, what do I really love? And one thing that I really love is talking, clearly. I love to talk. So I was like, maybe I want to start a podcast. And then another thing that was happening during this time, this is about 6 months ago, was I was just inundated with all of what I call trauma porn in the media. And I felt like every story that I was seeing that was about Black people was about us getting shot and killed by the police or about the police officer who got acquitted. And while these are all true stories and they're very important and we should talk about these things because they're real, I felt like I was drowning and suffocating in tragedy and sadness. And I wanted to have the opportunity to focus on joy because I was looking around and thinking, we can't all be dying. Some of us are still alive. What are we doing with that life? And how are people living? How are people thriving in this time of great intensity? So I decided I wanted to start a podcast about freedom and about beauty and light and art. And I wanted to interview other people of color and just find out what they're doing with their life that's exciting and life-giving, and what they have to share with other people about strategies for still finding a way to thrive, of being the flower that grows up out of the concrete. And then I realized I don't know how to make a podcast because I barely know how to make a PowerPoint. I'm just not a technically minded person. So I went back to my strong point, which is community organizing. And I thought, well, I don't know how to do this thing, but I know somebody who does. I know somebody who has a microphone and can hold it. I know somebody who can record things and edit them. And I also knew this really cool person, Anastasia, who's sitting next to me, who's our Seattle civic poet, of whom we are very proud. And I asked her to come and be my co-host. And then it became this whole thing where not only do I have a co-host, but I have interns, because students found out, some of my youth found out that I was putting on this podcast. One of them is right there, Aisha, wave. Yeah. And one youth had told me, you supported us through all these things, we want to support you. So they came, and they have been learning also how to do the technical things that I don't know how to do. And that's been really helpful. Thank you for that. And through this process as well, we have a platform where youth can speak on my podcast. So if you check it out, it's called The Deep End. The Deep End Friends, if you're looking at it on iTunes. So yeah, are you familiar with the Ikigai? No, it's a really cool idea. And that I feel like it's easy to think about what you love. Everybody knows what they love. And for the most part, with some self-awareness, we know what we're good at. But the other part is finding the alignment with what we love, what we're good at, what we can be paid for, and what the world needs. So we are going to do a think, pair, share using this as a framework. I want you to think about what is it that, not just that the world needs, but what is it that you need? What do you need from media right now? What would make your heart sing? The deep end is what I needed. So what do you need? And then the second question for me, whenever I want to get something, is what are you willing to give to get it? And we're going to take 3 minutes to discuss with somebody you haven't met yet. Connect. Oh, I hope you're having an awesome conversation and that I'm interrupting it. All right. Blink your eyes real fast if you can hear me. Ooh, that's weird. I don't like it. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I should have assumed that media people would be chatty. I like it. This is great. So what do you need? Money. Yes, me too. What else do we need? People. Explain. Name more.
Well, we both were talking about how we need more community support and different people coming to view our stuff and listen to our stuff and yeah. But
Okay.
also community support too, you know. Yeah.
Well, you're in a community now, so you can, as you're like, I'm one of those people. I think that if you say it out loud, like you're ready to receive it. So he just said he needs some people. Who can help with that? No, I'm not kidding. Like, who can help with that?
Yeah.
Where are you based?
I'm at Metro East.
Metro East. Who else is around here?
Portland?
Yeah.
Yeah. Portland, there's not one person from Portland.
Right,
here.
there are like so many people. Okay, but this is legit part of your homework for today and for the next 2 days is to get to know people, find out what they need, and if you have something that they need, give it to them. And if they have something that you need, ask for it and get it. Like, this is how community works, period. Do that. So what else? What else do we need?
I need better technology with what I do.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Better technology, so like we were just discussing, that what I'm putting out there for my community to see is seamless and good, and I'm not taking a whole lot of time doing it with this, old equipment so I can then continue making more meaningful content.
I love it. Who's got some equipment?
They're out there.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, like literally, like this is how community organizing works. There are people in this room who have exactly what you need. Your job is to connect with them and get it. So, your homework, you gotta watch that TED Talk. If you haven't watched it, it's really worth it. And then be really intentional as you move forward into the future about inclusivity from the beginning of your projects, not after the fact. Because who's in the room determining what the project even is like, I mean, things continue as they start. So making sure that from the start, this is a consideration that you're making. And then also within this framework of inclusivity, making sure everyone has common language. So everybody's on the same page. then I'd like you to go home and create your own definition of what ethical community media is, and make sure it's a shared definition with the people that you're working with. So not everybody's operating on a different framework. And determine what your fundamental principles are. And figure out how your passions align with what the world needs. Do you have any questions?
So when you were first beginning, how did you make sure, all of that? I mean, you didn't start with all those questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you did was you said, how can I insert my voice into what my passion is?
Yeah. Well, actually, I didn't even do that. I just was talking about what my passion was, and somebody came to me with the idea for having a platform or giving me more of a platform for my passions. So from there, I've realized how important it is that once you are in a room where people are making decisions, to open the door and to invite people in, and to strategically and intentionally try to connect people with what they need. So, for example, through this process, I've met with a lot of different community partners through part of being a part of the program manager, being a part of the program as being the program manager for Young Women Empowered. I have access to a lot of different community organizations that do youth media work. So what I started to do was create programs with my community partners where they brought in the skills that my youth were interested in learning. So I partnered with Real Girls, and they came and made a really cool video that you can see on YouTube of our Why We Create camp. And I partnered with KUOW's Radioactive program, and they came in and did a three session tutorial on how to make podcasts, and they brought the equipment because I didn't have any equipment, and I also, as we know, am not good with tech, but I know somebody. So these are the things, like we're becoming so siloed. We have a good idea, and then we think we have to, we're in charge of making that good idea come to life, when really, having the good idea is the first part, and the next part is inviting people into your idea. And those people can help expand what the idea is, and then you can co-create something even bigger. And it's hard. It's harder, honestly. It's way easier to do something on your own in some ways, and that you don't have to, meet for 5 hours to determine the color of this or, the sound of that. And through that 5-hour meeting, you're building community, and that's worth something. And I don't know that people are talking about that nowadays, but it's worth something. It's worth everything to be able to connect with people and then co-create something beautiful. Any other questions? I think that's it. Thank you. Oh, here we go.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so you found this work that you're doing, and that takes work. Okay, so I'm sure your brain hasn't stopped coming up with ideas and desires and stuff.
There's millions.
What do you do with that? Because now your time is taken up by this thing, which is great, but you have other things. What do you do with that stuff?
You have to learn to let go, and you have to learn to prioritize. So, I still write articles because I love writing articles, and I write less articles than I did before because I need to have more time to podcast. And then as I'm at the podcast itself, just actually the content, some of the people that I've met through the process of podcasting have given me crazy ideas that I want to follow up on. So I just don't sleep anymore. Sleep's really overrated. I'll do that when I'm dead. But also follow that thing that makes you really happy. And then recognize when it's not there anymore. Because I don't ever want to be a passionless journalist. And if I get to a point where it's not lighting my fire in the same way that other things are lighting my fire, I'm going to either take a long break and then see if I can come back to it with new passion, or I'm going to let it go completely and move in the new direction. You're welcome. Any other question? That was a great question. Well, I am super... Oh, yeah.
How do you think we did?
I think you did awesome. I am very impressed and excited about the way you chose to participate today. Because if you're showing up like this, like I'm excited to see how you're showing up in the world.
I'm sorry, I literally just came in here.
Hey, welcome.
I didn't hear anything you said before. So, based off of what I just received, how do you find the motivation to do the things you do?
How do I find motivation to do the things I do? It's really just there. Like, I think it's a bit, part of it is just, maybe I was just born excited about things. And I was like, ooh, there's things to be done. I want to do them. And I think part of it is seeing the impact as well. It's like, one of the most thrilling things ever was the fact that I broke the Seattle Globalist website. That so many people were reading what I had to say that it caused technical difficulties and they had to like reboot and stuff. I was like, what, for real? Like, it was so cool, because I never in my wildest dreams anticipated having that kind of an impact or being able to connect with so many people and have what I had to say resonate. And granted, there are a lot of people who hated my article, and I like that too, because they cared enough to hate about it. They cared so much that they had to like take time out of their jobs and like write a diatribe about how terrible and how like wildly racist I was because I thought that people of color living in a place was not dangerous. But like, these are like, that's exciting to me. That keeps me motivated. I'm like, ooh, what else are you gonna hate? I'm curious. I'm deeply curious. Like, where is all this hate coming from? Why are you so excited? You like literally so excited to hate on me, or so excited to connect with me. That's power. Yeah, thank you. Sure. Thank you all. You've been awesome.